Mastercard is the oldest payment network in Sri Lanka. We started our business in 1989. Half of the revenue comes from typical cards business, but half of the revenue that we do is by extending our technology and technology services to the consumers and the companies in Sri Lanka. One of the key things that we give importance globally is the sustainability and inclusivity. So if you look at, we have Mastercard, we have pledged to bring 1 billion people to the digital ecosystem by 2025 globally, and also to bring in sustainability with SMEs and MSMEs around the world.
The Payments Innovation Playbook with Mastercard. Hello, you're with Echelon's Turning Point, and with us in the studio today is Sandun Hapugoda, who is country manager for Sri Lanka and the Maldives for Mastercard. Sandun, welcome to Echelon.
Thank you for having me here.
Let's start here, Sandhu. Now, when we talk about Mastercard, I think it's in your name. We tend to associate Mastercard with credit cards, and I think that's for consumers, that's how they come into contact with the brand and the product, right? Can you talk about Mastercard and its role in the payments ecosystem?
Yeah, actually, thanks for that question, because a lot of people associate ourselves as a payments company. True, we do payments, but we are a technology company that's specializing in payments.
Sure.
So, since your question is about payments, I'll speak a little bit on that first. So, one of the things that we do, one of the major things that we do is interconnecting different stakeholders in the payment ecosystem. So the model that we have is called a four-party model. Four-party model is basically you need four parties to do a transaction. That is a consumer, and consumer's bank is called issuing bank. And then you need a merchant to do a transaction, and merchant's bank is typically called an acquiring bank. So there are four parties who will keep on doing transactions, and you need somebody to interconnect these people to process transactions. So we connect the issuers and acquirers to process transactions and also to do settlements between them. So the power of this ecosystem is, as an example, a Sri Lankan consumer having a card issued by a system hosted in, let's say, Hong Kong, can go to Europe and make a payment at a merchant who is acquired by a company in US. And this transaction goes around the world 2 times in matter of a couple of seconds. And that's the power of the ecosystem that we have. And also we do the settlements between these parties to facilitate the transaction, complete the transaction flow. Secondly, the technology that we bring in. Technology is, we keep on innovating payments technology, be it contactless, be it modern ways of accepting payments with soft POS, etc. And we keep on introducing the technology. So our issuers and acquirers, and also the third-party payment providers and fintechs and the merchants can adopt this technology and uplift the consumer experience that they give to the community. Thirdly, I would like to say one of the major things that we do is to bring the security aspects of this ecosystem, because it's important that somebody ensures these transactions, that millions of billions of transactions that flows through the ecosystem is secure. So one of the other things that we do is to ensure that the transactions are secure, be it a consumer themselves, or be it the account, or be it the transaction itself is secure when you process this. We can discuss that in detail later. Finally, the governance aspect that we bring in to ensure the sanity of the entire ecosystem, to make sure all the stakeholders in the ecosystem are following certain set of rules to ensure that everybody is safe in the ecosystem.
Right. So let me ask you this, Sandhu. Now, we can understand this four-party model in the context of a credit card. You know, I as a consumer go to a merchant, there's a merchant, then there's an acquiring bank, and then that goes to
the issuing
bank.
Correct.
Right? So there's four parties there, right? That part of your business is very clear. Is there a part of your business that goes beyond this?
Of course. So that's what I said earlier. We are a technology company. So if you look at Sri Lankan context or global context, the card-based payments is one thing that we do, but that's not the only thing that we do. More than half of the things that we do are relating to technology that we bring in. So we work with governments, we work with insurance companies, we work with healthcare sector, and so many other players to enable digital ecosystems, sometimes not even in payments. we work with farmers around the world to enable supplies and their ecosystems. Sometimes nothing to do with payments. As a technology company, that's what we do, extending payment solutions and also extending technology-based solutions to the consumers.
So is this rest of the business significant for you? Now, if you take Sri Lanka's context, what percentage of your business is related to credit cards?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you make a small margin every time there's a transaction. So what percentage of that comes from credit cards versus the rest of it?
Yeah, if you look at the credit cards and the card business, I'll put cards business together because credit card is one component of the cards business. So if you put cards business together and the rest of the digital services, I would say even half at this moment of time. Wow. So half of our business or the revenue comes from typical cards business, but half of the revenue that we do is by extending our technology and technology services to the consumers and the companies in Sri Lanka.
So I'm curious, okay, now if you sort of demystify for us what the second half of the business means, extending technology to consumers and companies.
Yes.
Right, as services. What are you doing here?
Oh, yeah. So a few things I can name off. One of the things is how we enable digital for players in Sri Lanka. It could be a startup, it could be a fintech. If you look at all the fintechs in Sri Lanka today, almost everybody uses Mastercard Payment Gateway as a business. So if you look at Mastercard Payment Gateway, we don't typically look at the Mastercard card rails there. We accept any card network on the Mastercard Payment Gateway. And today, many acquirers in Sri Lanka uses Mastercard Payment Gateway, and that's a technology service that we extend. And if you look at many wallets in Sri Lanka, many fintechs in Sri Lanka, all the large merchants in Sri Lanka uses our payment gateway to do the checkout. And we keep on innovating in that aspect. Irrespective of what card you use, we keep on innovating to improve the consumer checkout experience.
Right.
On the other hand, we also provide certain security solutions. So one of the things that we provide is a solution called Risk Recon, which is assessing the external threats that corporates could have. So as an example, today, your third-party risk assessments have become a pivotal thing, right? Because your data can be leaked not only by your network, but also from third parties. As an example, your data could be with one of your suppliers. You can have the most secure ecosystem, but your supplier is not secured enough. Your data could be leaked from them. So the solution that I mentioned is checking the risk level of that third party where you park your data, and then it will give you an indication of the vulnerabilities that your third party has. And then you can tell your vendor, unless you fix these vulnerabilities, I will not be able to give my data to do the business mutually. So things like that. As an example, the same example I said, there's nothing to do with payments there. So we do many things like that in the Sri Lanka market.
So your business is basically, it makes a little revenue every time there's a transaction. Is it based on volume of transactions? Is it based on value? Is it based on a combination of factors? How
yeah, on the payment card side of the business, it's a combination of both. There is a very small margin that we make out of the volume, and also there is a small transaction fee that we charge on the issuing side, which is very marginal when it comes to per transaction level. But our economics of scale helps us to sustain because we work with everybody instead of a single issue or acquirer. But other side of the business where we provide gateway services, processing solutions, and also the advisory support that we give. So we have a huge advisory arm called Mastercard Advisors. We call it data and solutions. And the advisory arm, the consultation projects that we do, again, sometimes nothing related to payments. We provide them certain consultations to banks. As an example, you have a savings account base which is not transacting with you. You can come up with that problem statement to us. We will do a very, very scientific study and give you recommendations to activate your savings account base, to do more transactions with you. So advisors, processing services, security solutions, and many other things that we do beyond the typical card processing is also a huge business to us.
You, by the nature of your business, will see a lot of transactions, and by that you will be able to sort of get a feel for how the economy, payments are functioning, right? So in sort of introducing or sort of leveraging on that information, you've sort of built an advisory business, right? So it looks like your business is also, while it's in payments and technology, it is also leveraging the data to provide insights for customers.
Of course, we don't have customer level data because all the transactions that we process are anonymized. So we have the anonymized data that we can consolidate, but can give a near accurate decision for each and every transaction. So as an example, today, every transaction processed globally within a couple of milliseconds, as I explained earlier, every transaction is scored by Mastercard by looking at the nature of the transaction, nature of the merchant, historical data of the issuer as well as the merchant. And every transaction, we provide a score for the issuer to take a quick decision on the risk that they take on the transaction. So that's one thing that we do. We also work with governments.
So that is like a credit score almost.
It's a score. It's a risk score
risk score.
a risk score that we give for the transaction. Now, world is moving from typical two-factor authentication, etc., that we had to the risk-based authentication of transactions. So, issuer can take an intelligent decision of the transaction rather than pushing the OTP or something to the customer to authenticate every time. So, every transaction will have a unique risk value attached, and that scoring is done by us. So, that's one thing that we do. Since you mentioned about the advisors and data, another big thing that we do is providing information relating to tourism, especially to governments and other relevant parties relating to tourism. We have done this in Sri Lanka and my other market in Maldives as well, where we have data relating to who would travel to your market, where they go, what they do. All this data we anonymize and give an indication for tourism-related authorities to take smart decisions on how should they optimize their marketing approaches, their tourism-related approaches, and which destinations to focus, etc. So these kind of things that we do by using our data approaches.
To the best of your knowledge, do you know if such data is or has been used to sort of estimate tourism spend and GDP as a result?
Oh, yeah. So one of the things that we do with the Tourism Insight is actually to give predictive analytics as well. We've been doing that in Sri Lanka during last couple of years as well, to give insights to relevant authorities in Sri Lanka and the tourism stakeholders to say these are the segments that you will expect, and these are the countries that you will expect your tourists to come to Sri Lanka, the other markets that we work with. So it's a historical analytical tool and also a predictive tool to get more insights about what to expect in terms of tourism. Tourism Insight is one part, but just because we discuss about that topic, I wanted to elaborate.
Sure. So since you have this data, obviously anonymized, however, this must be able to give you a view of how consumerism or how spending is going around in a market, including Sri Lanka, right? And Sri Lanka is just maybe coming off a deep economic crisis, where we are now beginning to see the first, green shoots of growth, if at all. What does the data, the evidence suggest about how strong consumer spending is from where you are?
In the Sri Lankan context? So in the Sri Lankan context, before we talk about the spend patterns, let me give you some of the statistics in Sri Lanka. So we have, if you look at the card market, we have about 19 million debit cards today in Sri Lanka market, debit cards, which is attached to your savings account. And we have about 2 million credit cards in Sri Lanka market in circulation. I won't say that every card is active in Sri Lanka, but that's the listed number of issued cards. And also to accept these cards, we have little over 100,000 POS terminals. Right? That's the setup. But if you look at last few years, of course, credit has been signature product all this time. But if you look at last few years, debit growth has been phenomenal in Sri Lanka market. If you look at today, the statistics, debit volume has taken over the credit volumes. Why? I think it has a lot of potential to grow because you have 2 million cards for credit and 19 million cards for debit. The active base is small, and whenever you activate one customer, it can keep on growing. Right.
So when you say debit volume, you mean the number of transactions?
Number of transactions as well as the volume itself, rupee value of the transaction. So now the rupee value has taken over the credit card volume. If you look at the number of transactions, actually debit number of transactions took over credit in 2014 in Sri Lanka.
Oh, right.
But it has been predominantly the small value transactions. But if you look at the value of the transactions, the rupee value of the transaction, it has taken over about 18 months back. But since then, it's been growing rapidly than the credit market, which is a very good sign for a developing country, actually. If you look at the developed markets, especially Europe and all that, it's predominantly debit markets, and consumers, without getting credit and getting into debt, they have a financial practice to use whatever the money that they have in their bank account. So the growth of the debit market is significantly a good thing in Sri Lanka. However, if you look at the size of the digital economy, we are still far behind. It's revolving around 5% at this moment of time, and our neighbors have kind of gone beyond 2 digits way back. The potential I see is that we already have this mobile penetration. We already have this 19 million cards in circulation. So it's a little bit of more effort that we have to put in to activate it, which is a relatively easier effort than giving a card and getting them to use. So we can activate the customers to say, now you can use your card, whatever you have in your wallet. So if you look at the statistics in Sri Lanka, even though we have 19 million cards, the average debit card is being used about 6 times a year. Now you go to supermarkets, you see so many transactions are happening on the POS machines. But if you look at our average POS terminal in Sri Lanka, there's only 5 transactions a day. So it's still has a room to, even though it's small, one can look at better glass half full or glass half empty kind of approach. I think I look at it in a very positive manner, that if we all work together, all the stakeholders, banks, financial institutions and networks, if we all work together, we can double this in short to mid term, where all our revenues will grow up and the entire ecosystem will also grow, and it's significant cost saving for the country as well.
Sure. Before I come to a question asking you about, how do we do that, right? Let me first get back to my original question, which is, based on the evidence that you're seeing from where you are, what can you tell us about the health of the Sri Lankan economy based on number and value of transactions, you think?
If you look at last few years also, where we had an economic struggle in Sri Lanka, we saw the number of transactions and the rupee value of the transaction consistently growing. So that means even though we had a economic situation, on the payment side, it is affected less because people keep on spending. For the payments industry, it kept on going. And if you look at last 18 months especially, the rupee value of the transactions have significantly grown. So I think we are going on the right trajectory. I believe no country is exceptional. Everybody is in the evolution cycle and at different stages. So I think in Sri Lanka, we are at the right verge of turning into digital payments from hugely cash-based economy.
Sure. Now, you also talked about, Sandhun, about activating this infrastructure. The infrastructure is there. There is high smartphone penetration. There is 19 million debit cards. That's, virtually everybody would have a bank account in that sense, right? We are a very connected country. What do you think those 1 or 2 things that Sri Lanka can potentially do to grow this from 5% digital payments to over double digits?
Oh yeah, that's a very good question. There are a couple of things that we can fundamentally do to, double down the digital economy. First is, I think it's very important that we activate the next year of consumers as well as merchants. So as I said earlier, the access to credit, if you look at through the credit cards, we still have 2 million cards in the market, and active customers would be probably half of that, active customers, because everybody who issues a credit card goes behind the same customer like you and give you another card, right? So it's very important issuers look at the next segment of consumers. On the merchant side, also it's important, this is for acquiring as well as for issuance, it's very important that we look at SMEs and MSMEs in this market. Because SME on the issuing side, spend is so much, which is predominantly on cash, and SME is the backbone of this economy today, which is predominantly doing transactions on cash. So if we can work together as issuers as well as acquirers and get their payments to be done digitally and also help them to acquire payments digitally. And there are enough solutions in Sri Lanka to do this already, just that we have to work together on that. And if financial institutions kind of have that appetite to reach out to these markets, which is a little bit of effort, I think that's one key thing that we can do. The second one is we have to do certain tricks to enable consumers to do digital payments as well. Of course, COVID forced people to move into digital. They did their very first transaction probably by using cards. They sent a WhatsApp to the corner shop, and when they deliver stuff, they did a fund transfer. I think that's a very good stepping stone for a digital payment. But things like transit. So if we get people to pay for their transit, and we have millions of consumers using public transportation today, and for railways and buses, if you can get them to use existing bank card, the statistics globally shows that it's very likely they will use the same card to do the purchases as well, rather than using cash. So there are certain things that we can do like that to help boost the digital economy. And also, we need to have appetite towards moving into new digital payment methods like open banking. How we can enable open banking to facilitate third parties like e-commerce merchants to come into the financial services ecosystem and facilitate the loan disbursements and other financial services through their platforms for the consumers. So there's a wider, bigger adoption through that. So of course there are fundamental infrastructure requirements like digital ID, etc. for that. If we have that, and if we push the country to have these fundamentals in place, including some of the policy changes, I think we can actually double down this digital economy on short to mid term.
Sure. So is this digital ID that we've been talking about for a long time a big deal? Is it going to be a inflection point in Sri Lanka's payments infrastructure to have this?
Yeah, I think digital ID is a key requirement for any economy for that matter. As an example, if you look at India, we have Aadhaar system, and after Aadhaar system, we saw a huge shift in terms of digital payment adoption. How do we do that? Is because starting from the onboarding point itself, you can authenticate the consumer digitally, and at Mastercard we call it a digital first approach. So you provide the service to the consumer digitally, be it a financial service or any other service, and authenticate the customer and provide these date payments or any other solution that you give in a digital first approach. And to do that, you need to have a mechanism to authenticate the customer. And that's a fundamental layer for things like open banking, where you need to authenticate the customer and get their customer consent before requesting a financial institution or any other third-party information provider to gather data. So I think it's very important that we have that on these fronts.
On the regulatory and policy front, besides implementing a digital ID, are there one or two other things that policymakers can facilitate that will sort of grow the adoption of digital payments?
Yeah, that's also a very good question because I think the policy decisions and the regulatory approach should be very country-specific approaches. Some of the mistakes that we have seen is regulators trying to just copy some of the other country regulations, right? I think you have to look at the market, size of the market, and the dynamics of the market when you decide on the regulations and the policy level changes. Just to give an idea, regulating pricing as an example may not be the best idea for Sri Lanka market because Sri Lanka market is small, as I said earlier, and number of transactions that will be done on a specific terminal or even on a QR would be so small that it won't facilitate the entire ecosystem because it's not only the consumer, but there could be a mobile app service provider, there could be issuer, acquirer, and there could be a third party. There are many players in the ecosystem who needs to be compensated. And by pushing the entire ecosystem to having low value could be very tricky because it might not help others to sustain. So we have to be very careful in certain markets by pushing certain regulatory requirements. So some of the countries, especially in Sri Lanka, I think it has to be market driven, some of the pricing level changes, but also there has to be policy level changes that has to come into the play with an enablement approach. Central Bank of Sri Lanka, as an example, has taken very good set of initiatives by launching fintech sandbox as an example, which where if you have a fintech product which needs to be tested, you can go through that fintech sandbox process. There's a conversation which has started on open banking, CBDC. There's initiative on low-cost acceptance as Lanka QR as an example. So these are very good initiatives that has taken by the regulator in Sri Lanka, and we need to keep on pushing that. And I see that happening from Central Bank of Sri Lanka as well.
Southern, stepping back a little, can you tell us about Mastercard's strategy, your growth strategy for a market like Sri Lanka? I mean, it's a market that seems prime for takeoff. Like you said, the infrastructure is there, but a few pieces are missing, so we really can't propel this.
Yeah, so Mastercard is the oldest payment network in Sri Lanka. We started our business in 1989, and for last 35 years we've been doing business in Sri Lanka. And we connect, as I said earlier, the financial institutions, issuers, acquirers. Now we have extended our relationships beyond typical banks. We work with non-banking financial institutions, we work with fintechs, we work with other startups, we work with healthcare, insurance, we directly work with some of the merchants. So one of the things that we keep on doing is to bring in our innovation that we do globally to help these ecosystems to grow their digital business. And that would be the strategy that we'll keep on doing, to bring in certain technologies and support and also security solutions that we can bring in while we enhance the consumer's experience. We ensure the security of the ecosystems. So this is the strategy that we've been having, and this is something that we'll be pushing the market as well. We also want to work more with certain segments, like some of the merchants that we want to expand our business with, to facilitate them to grow their technology. We also want to expand the SME segment, as I mentioned earlier. We also want to help the government to uplift their digital economy and digital economy related initiatives. If you have seen, the National IT Conference was sponsored by Mastercard, where they launched the DigiEcon 2030. And these are the policy level support that we will do, as well as certain technology related support that we will do for the government, as well as the players in other players in the ecosystem. And we will keep on doing this.
Sandhu Hapugoda, this has been a riveting conversation. You sort of painted a far bigger picture of what Mastercard's role in the payments landscape of Sri Lanka is, and potentially the growth potential for Sri Lanka itself here. Anything you think you need to add to round things off?
Yeah, I think in Sri Lanka we can expect a couple of greater things. We are also part of the conversation. I don't wish to take the credit myself, because there are bigger stakeholders and we are one entity supporting it. So one of the things that we will see is the greater adoption of debit card payments, as I mentioned earlier, and we also should work together to uplift the usage of debit cards. We also see some of the initiatives to support SME, MSMEs. So if you're a SME or as an MSME who's looking for digital solutions, I think you can contact any of your partners, and through the people that you work with, we are there to help them. We also have seen a greater adoption in terms of technology to uplift consumer experience and checkout experiences. So today we are driving this whole digital first approach, where you kind of forget how you make the payment. When I say that, let's say you want to book a ride share, go to a ride share application and book a taxi. We only want you to focus from going from point A to point B, and your payment will be done anyways. So these are the experiences that we will bring in. We also want to work with the government and other stakeholders to uplift these the bottom of the pyramid acceptance ecosystems by bringing certain technologies like SoftPOS. SoftPOS is a technology where we have today to convert your Android POS terminals into a contactless device. Now, as an example, by end of 2024, all the cards that we have would be contactless enabled in Sri Lanka. So if we can enable a small tuk-tuk player who has an Android phone to accept a digital payment on their own phone, nothing beats that, right? So these are the technologies that we currently work with. And you can accept things like SoftPOS and QR growing in Sri Lanka in future as well. So we would be glad and would be happy to be part of these roadmaps.
So I'm just curious, when you look at the KPIs that Mastercard would set for its unit in Sri Lanka. It sounds like these go far beyond increasing the volume and value of credit card transactions, right? There's so much more to the ecosystem. What would those KPIs that are important for Sri Lanka but may not immediately deliver financial results for Mastercard would be, in your opinion, but still important in your
Sure. So I think one of the key things that we give importance globally is the sustainability and inclusivity. So if you look at, we have at Mastercard, we have pledged to bring 1 billion people to the digital ecosystem by 2025 globally. And also to bring in sustainability with SMEs and MSMEs around the world. So I think some of the things that we bring in to the table may not really generate revenue for Mastercard immediately. As an example, my other market, Maldives, we were leading the implementation of transit solution to enable their buses and speedboats and ferries to accept digital payments. And we have been doing the project management, etc., where we might not really make money immediately, right? But enabling this ecosystem will ensure the sustainability of the digital payments and the entire community for a long time, where we all will sustain and thrive. So that's the idea of some of the initiatives that we do, and we will keep on doing that.
Sandhun Hapugoda, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for joining.
Thank you very much for having me here.